If you ever find yourself swimming in the freshwater lakes and streams in Europe, you may want to keep an eye on the dark waters below. The Wels Catfish may not have the teeth or temperament of a shark or crocodile, but it has just as fearsome a reputation. Known for centuries as a man-eater, the Wels Catfish may be the deadliest freshwater fish to date. But we'll just have to find out how true the stories are here in Life, Death, and Taxonomy.
Welcome back to Life, Death, and Taxonomy. It's your 30 minutes of interesting animal info. I'm Joe.
And I'm Carlos.
And today we're talking about a fish of legend for which meat is back on the menu. But more on that later.
Is that a Lord of the Rings reference?
It's a little bit. It ends with a Lord of the Rings reference.
Yeah, meat's back on the menu, boys. That's what all the catfish say to each other whenever meat's back on the menu. Meat's usually on the menu. We'll talk about that.
Unless you're like a fish that eats algae and stuff. But catfish are not that.
Some catfish are. Most are not.
It's hard to say that fish doesn't eat that because it's like, well, if it's there and they're hungry.
Most catfish eat most things that can fit into their mouths, but some catfish only eat like algae and stuff. But not these guys, not the Wels Catfish.
Okay, yeah, that's what we're talking about today, the Wels Catfish. A catfish that lives in a well.
Yeah, only Wels.
Just kidding. It's
one
really,
L. It's always really cramped. But it's also known as these are science's nicknames or just culture's nicknames. It's the sheet fish, SHEAT fish. So I don't know what that means. But I know what this means, the European man-eater. But we're going to call it here the fee-fi-fo fish and the man-munchies.
He's a man-eater. Okay.
Taxonomize it for us, Captain.
Would you like to hear the taxonomy? Here we go. It's in the kingdom you know, love, and are in, Animalia. It's in the phylum Chordata. This ain't one of those fish that don't have a spine.
Is there a fish that doesn't have a spine?
Are sharks Chordata? I think they are, even though they're all cartilaginous. But jellyfish.
they don't count.
Okay. The class is Actinopterygii.
We've been here before.
Mm-hmm. The order is Siluriformes.
It looks
Siluriformes? Would you say ur or
I would say Siluriformes.
Siluriformes. The family, Siluridae. The genus, Silurus.
So these guys are kind of like the pelicans, where they kind of just take over the last four categories.
Yeah, but the species is different, just like the pelican. The binomial name is Silurus glanus.
Glanus? Isn't she from accounting?
Glanus Knight.
Glanus Knight. But since we're in the business of naming things, it's time for my favorite part of the show, critter groups. And this is the part of the show where I ask Joe a question, and that question is the same every single time. And it's, what is the name of a group of these animals? Or what is the collective noun for these animals? I have some colloquial one, because I couldn't find an official one for catfish. It was just telling me to do fish, but I did find some ones from some professional noodlers. If you know what noodling is, it's just kind of standing in waist-high muddy water where catfish live and wiggling your fingers around where you think a catfish might be, and then it bites your hand, and then you catch the fish.
Mm-hmm.
But it could also be a snapping turtle, so you gotta risk it. Anyway, so
risk it to get the fish get.
The fish stick. Gotta risk it to get the fish stick. So, Joe, what is the collective noun, the noodling collective noun for catfish?
What was the word for collective nouns that you said last week?
Oh, terms of venery.
That's right.
It's a term of venery. What is the term of venery? That's just tough. It's not even like a fun. It's not even fun to say. It doesn't make just.
Sounds pretty regal.
I guess because you're venerating these fish. All right. So what is the term of venery for a catfish? Or a group of catfish? Is it A, a wedge? Is it B, a knot? K-N-O-T. Is it C, a formation? Or D, a graze?
What was the first one?
Wedge. Like like Luke Skywalker's friend who helps him take down the Death Star. Wedge.
I'm gonna go with a knot.
Final answer?
Final answer.
Ding, 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 ding. You're correct.
Heck yeah. I feel like that was familiar to me.
Was it? Have you been noodling?
I don't know. Like, I haven't.
Have you been moonlighting as a noodler?
I've been canoodling with the fish. I've been canoodling with the noodlers. But yeah, okay, sweet.
Good job. I thought graze would get you, but
see when the people when the proletariat is in charge of naming things, it's a little bit more intuitive to me.
when the plebeians are
When you leave it to the bourgeoisie, they just come up with the weirdest words. The bourgeois.
A bit of a taxonomic revolution here.
Yeah. Would you like to hear anything about how it looks and where and other general info?
I'll take it.
Okay.
If you got it.
The Wels catfish is a large freshwater fish that's native to Eastern Europe. It's become a prized sport fish, and because of that, it's been introduced to different parts of Europe and Asia, as far as the UK and China. It's got a typical catfish look with a long, slender body and a broad head and mouth. With their long bodies, they swim similar to eels, like in a snake-like pattern. Their color depends on their environment. Black catfish live in clear water, and brown or green fish live in brackish water. They've got those telltale whiskers that I think they're used for the same thing cat whiskers are for, being able to find your way in the dark and make sure you're not.
And to tickle you awake sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
Tickle their humans awake.
If I had a dime for every time my catfish swam up and tickled me awake, I'd have no dimes.
That's why you don't get That's why you don't adopt catfish from the catfish store.
Their bellies can be yellow or white, which is, what do we say? Cross shading, counter shading, which is
when they're from below, they blend in with the
sunlight
filtered
surface.
And then when from above, they blend in with the dark, gloomy depths. Also, I've read that because they swim like eels, they are some of the few fish that can swim backwards.
That's true. I did read that too. But these are big boys, this particular catfish. And when we talk about big or small, it's time for my favorite segment of the show. Welcome to the beloved Measure Up segment, the official listener's favorite part of the show. The part of the show when we present the animal size and dimensions in relatable terms through a quiz that's fun for the whole family. It's also part of the show that's introduced by you when you send in audio of yourself singing, saying, or chittering the words measure up into ldtaxonomy@gmail.com. We do have some new intros.
Hooray!
It's part of this big batch that Carlos procured. This one comes from...
It's the same one.
This one comes from Vicky, someone who we both know, but would you like to introduce this person?
It is my sister-in-law.
Sweet.
Josh's wife.
Okay.
The Josh from last week.
Awesome. Let's hear it. Without further ado, the listener's favorite part of the show. I was going to ask, is it as colorful and interesting as the last one when Josh did it?
The answer is yes.
And I did not ask that because I did not think Vicky was going to be so creative, and I was wrong. I stand corrected.
Then you don't know her at all. she has a pug named Albus
Pugledor?
Dumbledore, I guess would be but it's named Albus, and she calls it Mama's Angel. But for a long time, she would say it like she said it just now in the Measure Up. So she Mama Thitha, and I'm like, Mama said so. so it took a long time for me to figure out what she was talking about.
What is this, a character? Did you ever find out? Like, is this a character they're doing?
Yes, they're being Josh and Vicky.
Oh, gotcha.
They're being their silly
right.
selves.
Oh, okay, let's talk about the length of this fish. Catfish grow until they die, so they can also live for a pretty long time. As legend has it, this supposedly allows them to reach lengths of up to 5 meters or 16 feet, which is disputable. But how many?
Despicable. I thought that's what you were going to say.
It is despicable that they're this big. But we'll talk about it in a second. How it's possible and plausible, and there are a few relatively good accounts of them reaching these kinds of lengths and sizes, but there's a lot of other ones that are highly dubious. But we're gonna go with 16 feet this time. How many of the cat Tinker Toy, the smallest cat on record, go into the Wels Catfish?
Tinker Toy?
Yes.
Like the toys from like the 60s?
Yes. We're going by the length of the cat, but its record is how high it is, I think, how tall it is.
From stem to stern?
But here's, more like from feet to withers, I guess, or from feet to the top of the head.
Okay, I see.
But that's its record, but we're going by from stem to stern for the length.
Oh, so if it were laying down on the ground, nose to tail.
I think the tail's involved. Maybe not. But here's a hint. Tinker Toy was a runt that was born in Illinois in 1990 and lived to be 6 years old. It was full grown at 2 years old when it made records as the smallest cat.
I'm gonna say 7 inches long. It's like a baby cat. A kitten is another way to say that. So 7 inches. I should make it 6 inches if I just want to make this easy on myself. So I'll still say 7, but for the sake of math, I will say 35. 35. Tinker Toys, the world's smallest and probably most adorable kitten, go into the world's largest and probably most disgusting and ugliest fish.
I'm gonna level with you. I have no idea if it's cute. I assume it is. But I try to find a picture of it, and I just have no idea. There's a lot of propaganda photos out there of like a cat in the palm of someone's hand when you try to type this in, and that's fake, and I hate it. I hate that it exists. Stop making fake cats. But the answer is
fake cats.
The answer is 25.6 tiny cats. Tinker Toy was. You were close though. Tinker Toy was 19.
I said 35.
I don't know how you did that because Tinker Toy was 19 centimeters or 7.5 inches long. And incidentally, it was also 7 centimeters or 2.7 inches tall.
Wait, so if it was 6 inches long, and that means that 30...
It's 7.5 inches long.
Would go in. So then I added some cheddar on. Oh, I went the other way. I should use a calculator. I have that freedom, but sometimes I just don't.
You do have that freedom. But let's talk about the weight. 300 kilograms or 660 pounds. Again, maybe. But possibly. How many of Himi, the heaviest cat on record, recorded by the Guinness Book of World Records in 1998, go into the Wels Catfish?
You said 660 pounds?
Yep.
I'm going to say 6.6. I'm going to say this cat was 100 pounds.
Let's have a hint. Himi was transported in a wheelbarrow and held the record until it was challenged in 1998. That's when Guinness editors decided to stop recording individual pet weights to deter people from overfeeding their animals. This cat must have been huge. The one that was challenging Himmy, because they were like, "Yeah, we're not doing this anymore. This is awful."
Well, should they also not do that for people so
they
that people
don't
overfeed themselves?
They also no longer record human gluttony, and all food consumptions are based on speed and not overall calorie intake.
Good for them.
Yeah. You said 6?
Yeah, I think this cat was 100 pounds. 6.6, I think this cat was 100 pounds, which would be an insanely big cat.
Okay. Your guess is 6. The correct answer is 14.3 Himmies. Himmy was only 46 pounds or 21 kilograms.
I'm trying to imagine what a 100-pound cat would look like, and it's pretty disturbing, but I thought it was possible. Clearly, I was wrong.
I mean, maybe like a Mancoon that was severely overweight.
I guess a lion's over 100 pounds.
Very true.
It's a cat.
It is a cat, so it's possible. But that's all I got for Measure Up. Are you ready for some fast facts?
Hit us with them.
Okay. The Wels catfish can live as long as 50 years. That's pretty long for a fish. I think goldfish can do stuff like that too, and they continue to grow. But
really?
Yeah.
I've never met a goldfish that lived more than a week, but I've only met goldfish that I've owned. So
koi are like in a similar species as goldfish.
Oh, yeah.
And they grow big, and I think goldfish can get huge. Most Wels catfish don't grow longer than 7 feet and 190 pounds. Reports of incredible sizes are rare and dubious, and maybe they're true, maybe they're not. The catfish and every member of its order has a Weberian apparatus. The Weberian apparatus is a series of tiny bones that connect the swim bladder to the inner ear and acts as an amplifier, which is pretty interesting. This allows fish of this order to hear things that would otherwise be indetectable to the ear alone. The catfish also have chemoreceptors that allow them to have a keen sense of smell. So in brackish water, in dark water, they rely on smell and hearing to find and catch prey. Speaking of prey, they mostly eat worms, gastropods, insects, crustaceans, and other fish, but big ones can eat larger prey like ducks, frogs, rodents, and other birds. Pretty terrifying right there. Females can lay as many as 30,000 eggs per kilo of body weight. So when you talk about these larger specimen, that's a freaking load of eggs. Males
that is a lot of eggs.
Males will guard the brood until it hatches. They'll even splash water on broods that are exposed if the brood is exposed to air because the water level went down. They'll use their tails to splash the brood to keep it moist until it rises again. That
was poor brood planning.
That would be, but it's good fathering.
That's a lot of splashing for a long time. But good for them.
Yeah.
You don't usually find good fathers or good parents at all in the fish class. So yeah, good for them. You ready for the major fact?
I am ready.
It's time to get major and a little bit macabre. No, when I say a little bit, I mean a lot. Here, let's hear some stories about people possibly dying. People definitely dying, but people possibly dying because of these catfish. With an omnivorous diet and a tendency to eat larger animals, like you said, like ducks and rats, and even each other, you may be wondering, can this giant eat humans? Is this something I should be afraid of? Well, Wels catfish, the ones that are more than 6 feet long, have the means and digestive system to possibly kill and eat a small child. But what about a full-grown man? There are 19th century documents by the Russian biologist K.T. Kessler, not Katie, but K.T. Kessler, that report some specimens getting up to 16 feet long. Like you said, I don't think those are dubious. It was in the 19th century and they didn't have pictures. Well, they did, but it would take too long for the exposure to capture the fish.
That was the one that was cited as being the most credible. All of them from this century or from the 20th and the 21st century are not very reliable.
And so this specimen was over almost 900 pounds. So a catfish that big could definitely kill and probably eat a whole person. But just because they can doesn't mean that they do. I mean, the Wels catfish has been called the European man-eater for over 500 years. But the question is it just a legend? So let's talk about some stories. In August, and these are sad stories, so prepare your hearts for sadness. In August of 2016, a woman was swimming in a lake in Bavaria when she was bitten on the leg by a large fish. After kicking the fish off and swimming to safety, biologists studied the bite and determined it to be a Wels catfish that was about 6.5 feet long. They are very aggressive, especially when defending their broods. But this catfish was kind of typical size for a Wels catfish.
That behavior's the whole reason noodling works. They'll come out and bite, and then that's their downfall.
Yeah. In 2008, several Wels catfish were caught with human remains in their stomach in Russia, but it isn't known whether they ate these bodies after they had died or if they had killed these people and then eaten them. So that remains a mystery. All they know is that there were human remains in these stomachs. And World Daily News Report, the most reputable and dependable source of news out there, ran a story where a 410-pound, 100-year-old Wels catfish in Poland was found to have human bones in its stomach, as well as a well-preserved German SS Eagle pin worn by a Nazi officer. And when I say it's the most reputable and dependable news source out there, if you spend more than 10 seconds on the site, you'll know that I'm being incredibly sarcastic. But still, the story's there. But the Wels catfish isn't the only one suspected of being a man-eater. In 1998, a teenage Indian boy was pulled into the water of the Kali River. 3 months later, another young Indian boy was also pulled into the same river. And then in 2007, a Nepalese teenager was pulled under the same river by what was described as a mud-colored water pig. These attacks all happened within 10 miles of each other. A water buffalo was also dragged in. So it caused some concern. And Jeremy Wade, biologist, zoologist, expert fisherman, and host of River Monsters, investigated these attacks and suspected it was a guanche or gaunch catfish, another giant catfish native to South and Southeast Asia. The people in the area, India and Nepal along the river, regularly deposit the remains from funeral pyres into the river. So they suggested that the catfish had been eating those remains for decades and growing larger than others of its species and developing a taste for humans. Wade actually caught a gaunch when investigating, and it weighed 3 times the average for the species, but that was only 161 pounds. It was 6 feet long. So again, we are in the 6-foot range. Theodore Roosevelt mentioned in his naturalist book, Through the Brazilian Wilderness, that the Piraiba catfish, that's the name of the catfish, it lunged into a canoe with its mouth open. The 2 fishermen that were inside hacked at it with machetes until it was dead. They brought it back to the city where Roosevelt was stationed, and he said it was 3 meters long. Now that is more than 9 feet. So now we have an actual monster on our hands. And there's another story of a man who dove beneath the surface of a branch of the Amazon River and never resurfaced. Soon afterward, a Piraiba catfish came to the surface with a man's leg sticking out of its mouth. But that's hearsay, and also, even if it's true, there's the very real possibility that he dove into the water into the open mouth of a very large catfish, and the catfish is suffering just as much. So here's the reality. The reality is that most of the pictures out there that you'll find of a catfish with a person coming out of its mouth are fake. Catfish swallow their prey whole and have a surprisingly small stomach in comparison to their bodies. Most of what makes up their bodies is tail, not stomach. They're not pythons that can unhinge their jaws and just have a huge animal sit in their stomach for a month. It's pretty unlikely that a catfish smaller than 15 feet long could swallow a person whole or even try to swallow a person whole. However, all three of these types of catfish, are pretty aggressive, and because of their size, I can definitely believe that they are capable of attacking and drowning a person. Also, because they'll eat just about anything, I can also totally see them eating the remains of a person who has already died, someone who's drowned, or someone like the funeral pyre remains. So it is possible that these catfish could bite, drag, and drown a person when defending their nests before feeding off of them as opportunistic scavengers. However, I don't think that they actively hunt people or suck them under the water like in every horror movie where people wade through waist-high water. And they think that they discounted bull sharks and crocodiles for those attacks in India and Nepal, but I don't know why they discounted them.
Because that's what I have a big problem with that one story. There's two instances that were reported by river monsters, and that is dubious because they're listening to stories and legends, and they have a vested interest in those being legitimate because it makes for good TV. I'm not saying that they're lying. I believe they believe it, but it could be. I mean, it could be just the local legends, and they're making an episode about it. The Cali River attacks. They discounted crocs and sharks because it's rare. It's not likely that the shark, a bull shark, which can travel upriver, would go that far upriver. But I mean, it's not as crazy. It's just as crazy as a monster 15-foot fish, So I can see a bull shark out of its element attacking people and stuff, or saltwater crocodiles who can get pretty big. Other crocodiles like gharials and the other kind of crocodile that are native to that area are small, so they probably wouldn't have attacked a person. And the mugger crocodile, is that what you said?
That's the one that's native to India.
They can be large enough, but they didn't see any in the area. So my issue with that story is they discounted sharks and crocodiles because they didn't see any, but they did a lot of research and they did underwater dives and they didn't see a 300-pound plus fish either. So if we're discounting things we don't see, then why aren't we discounting a giant fish? That being said, there are big fish there not capable of eating a whole full-size person, but is it possible that there's a giant fish in there? Yeah, I guess it is. But it's also possible that it was some shark or other predator or crocodile or something. The Nazi remains one is ridiculous. Like you said, the World News Daily is not a reputable source, and they publish fictional stories, and the pictures that accompanied the fictional story of the bones and the metal were all dated wrong. So that's not a real story. But the older ones, these legends are pretty pervasive, and catfish are pretty pervasive. So I can see why these stories would be big, and fish stories are a huge part of human culture. And I can see if it can be that big, then why wouldn't they be able to eat a person? Why wouldn't they want to? I mean, if it's big enough, they're going to eat what they need to eat.
Or they're opportunistic. Then they are not picky. And so especially sadly enough, children, and if you have a 6 to 7 to 8 foot thing that just eats whatever, very real possibility. I think, like I said, it's more likely that someone, if someone were to be killed and eaten by one of these catfish, it's because they got too close to a brood, and then they were attacked and dragged down by the male catfish, and then later eaten by that same catfish, even though the catfish wasn't preying on them necessarily.
The catfish that live in the Amazon and in India, those would be in areas where crocodiles are. So at least those cultures know that the water can be dangerous. But the thing about the Wels catfish is that it lives in Eastern Europe, where there are no crocodiles or really any large water predators, except for in the ocean.
That's why it's like that. The first one I did was the first story was just a woman swimming in a lake in Bavaria. You should have nothing to fear in Bavaria, yeah. Bavarian waters. But so yeah. It's like you should be like, oh, there's probably like a trout or something in here. Just don't have to worry about anything. There's no sharks. 6-foot catfish.
But I think the fact that we can't even confirm without a shadow of a doubt like a recent sighting of a fish large enough to kill a person or swallow a person whole and eat them, I think most of these claims are legendary at best.
Swallowing a person whole is most likely completely off the table. But eating a person, even parts of a person, is confirmed, at least as recent as 2008. So there's something to these fish stories, but they are not all as they seem. And that's all I got. All right, so for you out there in Podcastia, don't be picky, but try not to eat any people and just keep on keeping on, like the Wels Catfish here in Life, Death, and Taxonomy. Hey everyone, it's Carlos here to tell you that interesting animal info is the cure for a number of common ailments such as monotonous task at work boredom, long car trip boredom, and even half marathon running boredom. If you are or know anyone who finds themselves suffering from any of these maladies, make sure to recommend interesting animal info to them. And the best place to get that is right here at Life, Death, and Taxonomy. So spread the word. See you next week.
Life, Death, and Taxonomy is my favorite in the world podcast.
Be careful. Careful in the water. I feel like every time we do something that lives in the ocean, it's like or lives in the water at all. I just don't want to go swimming in anything but a pool. And even then, got to keep my eyes peeled.